Dave Thomas from Wisconsin. Adrian, I was wondering if the amount of milk left in the cistern, your after milking scans, was that related at all to teat placement in those udders? Did you do any udder conformation scoring also?
We took photographs of the udder. In these animals, actually, the teat placements were pretty good. I have seen overseas where there's been a lot of selection on production, and you can wind up with very deformed udders where there's a teat down here and there's a teat up here, and how can you get the milk out of that udder? So we didn't specifically look for that, but that certainly would be a factor to consider.
Thank you. I think there was another question. Yeah, so over there.
Thank you. Gisela Albon. I've got a question to the nitrogen leaching. You measured the nitrogen leaching, but then estimated the soil, the way the nitrogen leaches through the soil. What was the standard error for your cumulative nitrogen leach on average? You didn't indicate any significance levels or standard errors.
Yes, I'd hope somebody wouldn't come up with that question, partly because it's a preliminary data set, but also because the 4 paddocks are the individual replicates over which we would estimate our standard error. So for the interest of this presentation, I wanted to present each of the 4 paddocks as replicates separately. Just to deal with the first part of your question first, so the daily soil-water balance model is a standard way of estimating drainage and multiplying that by a measured nitrogen concentration. That daily water balance model is a very good way of estimating drainage, and it is backed up by some estimates of the soil water characteristics multiplied by the rainfall, which is measured for the site. So it's pretty good. With regards to the standard error, I don't have that number on me, but in the next year's presentation, when we have the full set and I can provide the 4 replicates from 2 years, that will be there.
Can I just ask, you did show some dairy cattle data, and they have been repeated quite a lot. What is the standard error on those ones? I mean, it might be pretty similar.
Yeah, I apologise again, I don't know the numbers off the top of my head.
Okay, do we have another question? Yeah, we've got a question over there. Can you please... Oh, sorry. Yep, you go first then, and we'll come to you.
Okay, one for Diana again. Regarding your systems regarding the nitrate leaching, you appeared to have the sheep grazing on the platform 12 months of the year, when in fact, when you're looking at many cow dairy systems, they're grazed off the platform for 60 days, and for sheep it potentially could be 100 plus days grazing off the platform, say from April through to August. That would have a huge impact, I'm suggesting, on the end leaching. Have you got any sort of comment on that?
Yes, the key period for nitrogen leaching risk is grazing and urinary end deposited through the summer, early autumn into late autumn. Those animals are spending, in the hybrid system, spending more time inside from autumn. So the key period for spring sheep is around summer through to early autumn. We have shown that in dairy cow studies where leaching risk is greatest from the early autumn depositions of urine.
What do you define as early autumn, March?
Yes, it depends on the season a little bit. Yes, but February, March, I'd say. Yeah.
Okay, yeah, I have a question over there.
Hi, I'm Julie from Thorvald. Just related to you, Diana, with the nitrate leaching. Is there any testing with, like, I know you've done the soils, but with the pastures as well, as we know that some pastures can help fixate nitrate leaching?
Yeah, thanks for asking that. It's really interesting hearing the talks around the milk composition and potential health benefits and things. If we turned that on its head and said what kind of influences are happening at the farm system level with regard to diverse pastures, so pastures that have multiple different species rather than just ryegrass and white clover. There is plantain is showing a lot of promise, and also in a mix with the likes of lucerne, sometimes chicory, as well as the grasses, Italian ryegrass. They're showing, in separate work, they're showing great potential to reduce leaching losses just through increased winter activity, also lower N content, so less N going through the animal and less deposited means potentially less leaching. That could be a great option for some of these dairy systems, and I'd also suggest that some of our colleagues looking at milk composition and health benefits could see whether those mixed pastures come through with something different as well. Thanks.
Do we have any further questions? Yes?
I'll get there as well. On the topic of the nitrogen leaching, a lot of the sheep dairy systems will be using external, hard feed brought in from outside the farm, especially if they're trying to move towards higher total production systems. What effect do you think this will have on nitrogen leaching?
Another good question. So this is one that we know a bit more about due to a lot of the overseas systems having much more mixed ration systems. So overseas, a much larger proportion of the diet, 50% and over, is brought in feeds or concentrates. The biggest effect this tends to have is that they are lower in N content. So the total N intake in those mixed ration systems is much lower, so less N in means less N out generally. However, in most of the New Zealand systems posed that have some sort of concentrate brought in, it's still not a high proportion of the diet, so the total intake is still quite high, and most of it's still coming from pasture. So I wouldn't yet expect to see a really big effect on N leaching if we're still mainly pasture based.
So overseas, generally the hard feed or the concentrate feeds are lower in the total protein and than the forage that they're eating?
Correct.
Okay, we have time for one last question. Yeah, I think there's one at the back there.
Yeah, question for Adrian. Adrian, how plastic is the udder? So are you seeing the cistern get bigger because there's more production? And if not, and it is a true effect, could you select very young or lambs or young ewes with large cisterns? Because obviously we want to select our animals before they're in production.
Yes, that's a good question, Suzanne. We would hope that we would be able to do that. The cisterns are plastic. They do change with time. That's one of the reasons why I mentioned the question about the natural cistern size. Because in dairy cows, for example, as soon as the cow thinks that it's going to get milked, it often has a bit of a milk letdown and it artificially blows up the cistern. So what we need to see is the natural cistern size. So, and of course cisterns are developing right the way through as the udders develop. We have done some preliminary studies in sheep and cows and that, but we haven't yet been able to link that with later on production for a number of reasons. There's another study in cows that's happening on that, and hopefully we'll be able to get some more out of this study as we get more information from another group which I didn't mention that were part of the primary study looking at the lambs, and it's looking at their milk production records.
Okay, thank you all, and I suggest we thank the three speakers.